Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. I'm Colin, and today we're going to be talking about the brand new Tycho album, Infinite Health. Now, this is the seventh full length LP from San Francisco based electronic music producer, multi instrumentalist Tycho. Technically, I feel like this is the sixth full length LP because 2020 Simulcast was basically just an instrumental version of 2019's Weather. Now, 2019's Weather was definitely a little bit of a style change for Tycho. He had some more vocal features from one particular artist throughout the majority of the album. Now, on this new one, Infinite Health, he's definitely going back to his roots. A lot more traditional, like ambient, chill wave, down tempo stuff, whereas Weather and Simulcast had some like stronger indie rock elements and like indie dance elements thrown in. But you can still definitely hear a lot of that style and influence on Infinite Health. Definitely a couple tracks at least have a pretty strong like indie dance, indie rock vibe. But the album is basically pure instrumental again, kind of getting back to the trilogy of albums he released in the early to mid 2010s. Now, overall, I was pretty happy with this album. I think Tycho is easily one of the best, like, down-tempo ambient electronic artists out there, and I've pretty much enjoyed every single release that he's put out. And this one is no different. So it starts off with a track called Consciousness Felt. And this one's really cool. So the drums are kind of like a break beat, almost like 80s hip hop thing going on. And then it's got like really building and sweeping synths that kind of come in over that. Tycho is really known for very like floaty and airy synth leads, and contrast of that with some like heavier and more serious beats. Definitely right in his wheelhouse. Again, kind of seeing him go back to form. Really groovy bass line kind of throughout all of it as well. Then it goes into Phantom. Now this one, a little bit more upbeat. It's got kind of almost like a borderline disco beat, which I do really enjoy. And then on top of that, there's this really fun kind of looping synth line. Then it's like culminated in a borderline like 80s inspired synthwave melody, which just goes really well over like the heavy disco beat. The drum tempo does change up a little bit on this track, but it's still pretty consistent and very dancey. Really fun song. Then it gets into Restraint, which opens with like this kind of plucky guitar lead, gives it almost like a psych pop kind of intro feeling, but then it fades into this really beautiful, just like ambient soundscape. And this song, more than almost any other one, I feel like is really driven by the drums. They're very restrained and very minimalist, but they very much drive the track forward. It's definitely, I think, one of the highlights as far as the drum performances go on this album. After that comes Devices, which is probably my favorite song on the entire album. This thing is almost just like a straight up trance song. It's got really upbeat, danceable rhythm, pulsating yet floaty synths. Again, that's kind of what he's always been known for, is really like airy, elevated synth lines. These are a little bit more driven and, definitely have some more like traditional EDM trance sort of aesthetics thrown in there. It's a really great just like driving track. I was listening to this album for the first time on my drive to work this morning, and I drive about 5:30 in the morning, so it was dark on the freeway, and when this song came on, I kind of just lost myself in it, and it was a really cool experience. Then we get to the title track of Infinite Health. Now, this is the one, at least the first song, where I kind of felt like I was missing something. This is the only song to have a feature on it. It does feature Cautious Clay, and the first taste you get of him on the track is like right at the beginning, just a very kind of breathy and soulful, like short line, and then you don't see him again like until almost 2/3 the way through the track. And I gotta feel like I was being edged a little bit, because the entire time I kept waiting and wanting a little bit more of his vocals on the track, even if he wasn't necessarily like actually singing lines or words, just kind of the breathy, airy, soulful crooning that he's kind of known for. You get a little bit of it towards the end, but I think it could have benefited from having more of it thrown throughout there. Obviously, this is a pretty much straight instrumental album, like the majority of Tycho's discography, so I'm not too upset about it, but I definitely like all 3 times I've listened to that song so far, I wish I had a little bit more, but otherwise it is a really fun song. The intro to it is pretty out there. The drums are a little experimental. They've got a little bit of like off tempo, off timing elements to them. Then it gets into like this really funky bass line, and that's really where I wanted some more of those Cautious Clay vocals. But overall, like the instrumentation is still really strong on this. Anyway, then it gets into Green. This is probably my least favorite track on the album. This is probably the most just like straight up down-tempo ambient track. It's very slow, very floaty. Definitely, would be great background music if you're studying or, trying to focus on something else, which is, I feel like, the vast majority of down-tempo ambient stuff. It's fine. It's there's nothing wrong with it. It's not very exciting to me. Especially considering like the highs that I've experienced on this album so far. But then it goes right into DX Odyssey, which is a more kind of like dark pulsating bass line that I really, really enjoy, at least in the beginning. And then it's got some more of his kind of signature floaty, ethereal synths layered on top of that, which, I don't think there's anyone out there right now really doing that style better than Tycho. And it's nice to see that, 6, 7 albums in, he definitely hasn't lost his touch. Then it goes into Totem, which is borderline just like a straight up French house track. It's got some really funky, sort of like pulsating guitars on top of a pretty traditional house beat, soaring synths throughout, like all over the place. Definitely feels like an homage to Justice or Daft Punk or any of the other like French house greats. But it still very much feels like a Tycho song and sounds like a Tycho song, which is, what you want from a Tycho album. And then it ends with Epilogue, and I think the way that you finish an album is pretty important. I think there needs to be a lot of thought that goes into the track orders and how you lay out an album and like whether or not it's going to be cohesive. And Epilogue, it's an interesting way to end. So it's a pretty short track. I want to say it's like a minute and a half or something like that. And it's basically just an outro. So very down tempo, very laid back, very minimalist, which is not a bad way to end the album. It just feels a little lackluster. Like you've had 8 tracks of varying kind of genres or subgenres within like, his own niche, but still all very much sounding like him. And then you have like this minute and a half outro that it almost kind of goes out on a whimper. I will say, for it being the last track, at least it's not super long. Like it doesn't drag on. I could see a lesser artist doing something like this and having it go for like 4 or 5 minutes, and then just you getting a little bored with it towards the end. Overall, though, I mean, it's still another really solid album from Tycho. I don't think he has missed with any of his releases. They've all been pretty solid. Definitely something that I'm going to go back and listen to. It's not one that I pre-ordered. I'm going to be honest, this wasn't even really on my radar. I completely forgot this was coming out when I first heard the couple like singles that they released. So I actually don't know if I'm going to pick it up yet or not. I don't have any Tycho on vinyl right now, which I am now realizing is a pretty glaring hole in my collection. But if I'm going to get Tycho, I'm going to start with Awake, and then, this would probably be like my 4th or 5th purchase in his discography. But it's still a really solid album. I'm going to give it a really, really good, strong B+. Not groundbreaking, but it's going to be a good time, especially if you're into this type of music, and definitely one I recommend you check out. So, yeah, that's going to be it for me, guys. Let me know down in the comments if you listen to this album yet, what you think. If you haven't, go check it out. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.